When someone who spent years building a narrative starts publicly questioning it, that's not something you stroll past. Anna Kasparian co hosted the Young Turks for over a decade and one of the biggest progressive platforms on the internet, and she built her brand on identity focused commentary. Now she's saying race based thinking is divisive and toxic, and the people she used to stand beside are turning on her for it. That reaction alone tells you something real is shifting. This isn't just about one person changing her mind, something bigger is moving underneath the surface of American working class life right now. And the Young Turks launched in 2002 and grew into one of the most watched independent news operations online. More in particular, YouTube, pushing millions of viewers per episode at its peak. Anna wasn't just a contributor, she was a central voice shaping how that audience understood race, politics, and social justice. And when the George Floyd protests took over the national conversation in 2020, she was deep in it, defining that narrative loudly and pushing back hard on anyone who questioned any part of it. And there's a clip from that period worth understanding. She was responding to someone who raised doubts about the official account of George Floyd's death and made arguments in defense of Derek Chauvin. Her response went directly at happens to be white people, quote unquote, who agreed with that position. She said, another quote unquote, for all the white people celebrating this, I know a lot of you are also addicted to drugs. She wasn't making a policy argument or talking about systems in that moment. She was pointing at a group of people by skin color and using it as a weapon. That's the same person now sitting in interviews saying race based attacks are wrong and harmful to society. Now, and as you guys know, and I know that the internet is forever. Now that we have the internet, you can go back and pull up receipts. And this is why this is happening, because the contrast matters, and not because it's ironic. It matters because it shows how easy it is to get locked inside of a way of thinking when every institution around you keeps reinforcing it. And when your whole professional world shares that same set of assumptions, you stop noticing when those assumptions stop matching what people are actually living through. And that gap only becomes visible when real life pushes back hard enough to force an honest look. And I want you guys to check out the clip.
um, the Trump administration just get rid of a whole bunch of black and brown senior military officials recently who were up for promotion? Wasn't this a thing?
They got rid of a bunch of military officials that probably raised some red flags about what Pete Hegseth wants to do in the Middle East. Definitely. There's no question. Yeah.
So you don't think that race was a part of that? You don't
No,
think
that is a problem.
Yeah.
That is a problem. That is a problem. I honestly don't want to spend my entire life and career harping on race. Okay, that's where I'm at. I'm an American. We live in a diverse country. Everyone needs to be treated with equality and respect. But at the end of the day, what pits us against each other the most are the elite, are those who steal money from every single one of our paychecks and funnel it to a foreign country so they can do atrocities, so they can expand their borders. Yes, I'm talking about Israel. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't give a shit about race at all. At all. I don't think about it. So, for instance, after the George Floyd protests happened and everything, there was this culture of people openly saying some pretty horrific things about, people with light skin, just open racism against white people.
Ana Kasparian, what in the Charlie Kirk is going on with you, girl? Racialized individuals cannot be racist towards white people because racism is about power structures. People of color can be racially prejudiced towards white people, and often rightfully so, but because they lack the institutional power relative to white people, they cannot be racist. Prejudice, when combined with institutional power, results in acts of discrimination and oppression and is therefore classified as racism. You go on to talk about how the working class is struggling because of rising economic inequality, and I agree with you, but you can support the working class without neglecting systemic racism and perpetuating the myth of reverse racism.
I don't really care, but I know how devastating and toxic it is to a society. So, for instance, after the George Floyd protests happened and everything, there was this culture of people openly saying some pretty horrific things about, people with light skin. Just open racism against white people. And I know that sounds crazy because historically speaking, white people have been of privilege, right? But we're also living in a country right now where it doesn't matter if you're white, if you are a working class person, you're screwed. And how is it helpful to now do the reverse of the terrible, bigoted or biased comments that were said about other groups of people. Like, you're not going to change the culture unless you're willing to reject all of that, right? And you don't want to see it directed at anyone. I even saw it directed at Asians during the affirmative action fights, because there were a group of Asians who challenged affirmative action all the way to the Supreme Court. And so all of a sudden you have a minority group in the United States that people on the left were saying some pretty horrific things about because of the fact that they're Asian. Oh, Asians think so highly of themselves. They think they're white. And this, how is that conversation helpful? It's not.
They've gotten way too comfortable just saying off the wall crap now. Ever since SCOTUS gutted Section 2, the masks have come off. Has there ever been an instance where white people have felt suppressed, have had their rights stripped from them by black people? Like, have black slave owners captured white slaves before? Please find it. People like Ana are expecting the black community to want revenge. And y'all have been waiting for this revenge for 400 years. It would have happened already if it was ever going to come. We're better people than that. The racism is coming from one side. And until Ana and people like Ana are willing and ready to admit that, we're not going to get out of this. The left doesn't start with anti-capitalism. It starts with anti-racism. So just wanted to put that out there.
There was no physical evidence that George Floyd was murdered by a cop. The autopsy showed that George Floyd almost certainly died of a drug overdose, fentanyl. But by that point, facts didn't matter. It was too late. Cities had been destroyed, along with the fabric of this country itself. Scores of people had been killed. Democratic partisans used a carefully concocted myth, a lie, to bum rush America into overturning the old order and handing them much more power. It worked flawlessly.
What does that even mean? Cops get to go around murdering people with impunity all the time. So wait, people who are protesting that are the ones in power or with power? And also, for all the white people celebrating this, celebrating that ridiculous argument in defense of Derek Chauvin, I know a lot of you are also addicted to drugs. And so you're setting an incredibly dangerous precedent when you say that it's okay for cops to manhandle you and murder you in broad daylight like that, as long as you got a little drugs in your system. It's disgusting, absolutely disgusting. George Floyd isn't here to defend himself. George Floyd was walking about. He seemed perfectly fine until Derek Chauvin decided to kneel on his neck and not let up until George Floyd was dead. I don't care what he had in his system. That argument from Tucker Carlson is absolutely disgusting.
So now that you guys got the full context in its entirety, the contrast matters, right? And when you look at that, and I told you guys the gap when it becomes visible when real life pushes back hard enough to force an honest look. And real life did push back. The 2024 election results, years of decline in trust in media, growing frustration from working people across every background, all of it created conditions where some people were very comfortable inside certain frameworks, started questioning the framework itself, and Ana Kasparian is one of those people. This video isn't about defending her or going after her. She said what she said during that period, and some of it caused real harm. But what she's saying now deserves a careful look, specifically of where she's saying it from. She isn't an outside critic making familiar arguments. She's someone who was inside a machine, describing how it operates, where it stopped working. And that's a different kind of information. And here's the life lesson sitting underneath all of this. When a story you've been told stops matching what you can actually see and right in front of you every day, the honest response is to update the story. Most people don't do that publicly because the social and professional cost is too high. And the fact that she did it anyway and is now catching fire from her own side for it tells you exactly how much pressure exists inside these spaces to stay in line. So what exactly did she say that started all this, right? And I just want to recap and bring it all together. In the first clip, the host brought up the Trump administration removing black and brown senior military officials from promotion consideration and then asks Anna directly whether she thinks race was a factor. And instead of going where most people expected her to go, she pivots completely. She says she doesn't want to spend her life and career harping on race. She calls herself an American first. Then she goes further and she says what divides people most isn't skin color, it's concentrated power at the top, pulling money out of everyone's paychecks and funneling it elsewhere. She even names Israel specifically. And then she just says it plainly, she doesn't give a damn about race at all. Put that in plain English. She's saying identity labels are getting in the way of a clearer conversation about who's actually making decisions that affect working people across every background. She's not claiming that discrimination has never happened or doesn't exist today. She's saying that when race becomes the primary lens of every single issue, it becomes harder to see the specific systems and decisions creating pressure on regular people regardless of what they look like. And that's a more specific argument than a reaction to that clip suggests most people actually heard. Then she goes even further. And this is the part that really set things off. She describes what followed the George Floyd protests. A culture of people openly saying harmful things about people with light skin, and she eventually says it plainly, open racism directed at white people. She acknowledges how that sounds given the history of privilege in this country, but her point is direct. Right now, if you are white and working class, you're dealing with the same financial pressures as everyone else. Flipping the direction of harmful comments doesn't fix anything. It just produces a new version of the same problem pointed at a different group. And she also brings up Asian Americans during the affirmative action fight. And this is context a lot of people missed. A group of Asian American students challenged affirmative action all the way to the Supreme Court. The response from parts of the left, Democrats or Democratic Party, wasn't to engage with the legal argument. It was to go after Asian Americans as a group. Comments circulated saying things like they think they're white, quote unquote. Anna calls that out directly, which was the whole sentiment of why she's saying, I'm just breaking down the comments and where they were coming from based on these three clips. So Anna said, comments circulating saying they think they're white, and Anna calls that out directly and asks the obvious question: how does attacking a minority group over a legal disagreement help anyone? And a common sense point sitting underneath all of this is straightforward. If you only flag discrimination when it moves in one direction, you're not applying a consistent standard, you're applying a selective one. And selective standards don't hold up over time because they can be turned around and used against anyone the moment the circumstances shift. Most people can feel that inconsistency even when they struggle to put words to it. This tension isn't a new invention. It goes back to early American labor movement, right? Workers across different backgrounds were beginning to organize around identical problems. Dangerous conditions, wages that couldn't cover basic cost, indifference from the people running the operations. Progress happened when the focus stayed on those shared conditions. It stalled every time identity divisions crept into those spaces, because the moment workers start seeing each other as competitors instead of neighbors dealing with the same situation, they stopped seeing the shared source of the problem clearly, and nobody had to fight the workers directly. The division did the work instead. That's the dynamic Anna is touching on here. Even without framing it in those exact terms, she's describing what happens when the lens used to examine a problem starts distorting the picture instead of clarifying it. And the reaction she got from, her own side, the supporters of hers, makes a lot more sense once you understand what's actually at stake in that argument. And here's where it gets worth slowing down for. Because the reaction Anna got from her own side didn't just push back on her argument, it put a much bigger communication problem on a full display. And that problem affects every community trying to have an honest conversation right now. The first response worth breaking down is the quote unquote prejudice plus power definition of racism. That was in the first clip. The lady had the headphones and she was explaining it. Someone responding to Anna's comments said this directly: you can't be racist towards white people because racism requires institutional power and certain groups simply don't have that power. Then went further, saying racial prejudice towards white people is often justified given the history. Now, That definition does exist in academic and sociological spaces. It didn't come from nowhere, and it's worth understanding where it came from, honestly. The argument is that meaningful discrimination operates through systems and institutions, not just individual attitudes. Some scholars use that framework, and it has a specific perfect purpose in that specific context. But here's what a communication breaks down in practice. When a definition built for a classroom gets carried into everyday life, into what someone says to a coworker or what gets posted publicly after a national event, it stops matching what regular people can observe directly. Someone who feels they're being treated differently because of how they look and how they look isn't running a structural analysis in that moment. They're responding to what's in front of them. When the official framework tells them their experience doesn't count as what it feels like, you don't produce understanding, you produce a trust gap. And once that gap opens, the broader conversation about real systemic problems becomes nearly impossible to have to have productively. That's the cost. Not bad intentions, but real consequences regardless. And that gap being specialized, that gap between specialized language and everyday experience is exactly what Anna is pointing at. She's not denying history, she's observing that when definitions stop matching what people can see in front of them, those definitions stop working as tools for connection and start working as walls. And the second piece of Backlash cuts deeper. The second clip that I showed you guys, another person that was responding to Anna and said plainly, the left doesn't start with anti-capitalism, it starts with anti-racism. That was the second clip. Read that sentence twice because it lays the entire internal disagreement bare without any interpretation needed. This person is openly saying racial identity comes before shared conditions in the priority order. So when Anna argues the real dividing force is concentrated power affecting working people regardless of background, she isn't just offering a different opinion, she's challenging the foundational assumption of how that particular framework organizes itself. And that's why the reaction was so intense. It wasn't really about Anna as a person, it was about which framework survives contact with a changing reality. The moment in this backlash that deserves the most attention is actually the quietest one. Someone raises the point that black people have opinions on immigration in the border. A self-described progressive response, I don't give a damn about what black people care about. Just like that, quote unquote. That was the words. So treat that as a moment of honesty rather than just a talking point, because what it reveals goes far beyond this specific situation. It's something that happens in workplaces, families, and community organizations across every part of the political spectrum. When the people a group claims to represent start expressing opinions that don't fit the group's agenda, you find out very quickly whether the representation was ever genuine. Sometimes it is, and they work through the disagreement respectfully. Sometimes it isn't, and you see it clearly in moments exactly like that one. Labels, whether it's the quote unquote black community or quote unquote working class or quote unquote real Americans, get used as shorthand to claim moral authority. The moment the actual people attached to that label think independently, they get told they portrayed the group. That's not representation. That's controlled. That's controlled, dressed up as care. Most people recognize it the instant they see it clearly because most people have been on the receiving end at some point in their own lives. The backlash against Ana Kasparian doesn't disprove what she said. It demonstrated in real time right in front of everyone watching, and that demonstration matters far more than the argument itself because it shows exactly where the communication broke down and why regular people across every background are losing patience with it. Right? Now, and I want to get to another part of the backlash because I'm just trying to break it down and inform you guys and give you guys the full context of what Ana Kasparian was saying and the backlash behind it. And I'm trying to tie it all in together with a better, far more productive conversation. That's productive while being objective here at the same time. And, you know, it's an uncomfortable conversation. I don't like divisive rhetoric, but I'm trying to point out a bigger point here with productive conversation, tying it back to um love, peace, and positivity and unity, which I always advocate for and always will be for the entirety of my life, no matter what color or background you are. I just want to put that out there as for me. Now let's get into this another part of the backlash. Or I should say disagreements that are intense.
There was this culture of people openly saying some pretty horrific things about, people with light skin.
Light skin is white skin. And the culture of people that she's talking about, being that she brought up George Floyd, she's talking about Black people.
Just open racism against white people. And I know
she's now heading into reverse racism. We all know that reverse racism does not exist. The definition of racism is prejudice, bias, plus power, meaning you have to be a certain race that holds power to hurt other races. Black people can be prejudiced. Black people can be biased. Black people cannot be racist because we hold no power. And Ana Kasparian knows that. This is a dog whistle to MAGA. They've been courting MAGA, the people who are leaving MAGA, but they use racism to lure MAGA onto their side, right? She knows this. Black people have no power to hold any other race down, to oppress any other race. We have no power. But what race holds all of that power?
White people have been of privilege, right? White, if you're a working class person, you're screwed. And how is it helpful to now do the reverse of the terrible, bigoted or biased comments that were said about other groups of people? Like, you're not going to change the culture unless you're willing to reject all of that, right?
What Ana is saying is that you're not going to change the culture, meaning Black people should not speak up about their oppression. Black people should not correct racism and racist. Black people should not continuously remind white people of history so that you can learn from history so you don't repeat the mistakes of the past. Why? Because it makes white people feel bad. It makes white people feel bad. So no, we want Black people to stop talking about their oppression, the racism. We want to forget all of that. We want a clean slate and let's just move forward. And Black people, if you experience racism and oppression, don't talk about it.
Want to see it directed at anyone. I even saw it directed at Asians during the affirmative action fights because there were a group of Asians.
All right, so that's another form of the backlash. That was another individual responding to Ana Kasparian and what she was saying. So now that I gave you guys 4 clips in regards to that, I have one more clip that I want to show you guys in regards to the matter. And then I want to tie all this together talking about the distraction theory of how division keeps regular people stuck, right? It keeps people stuck. Because I want to zoom out because what we're watching or what we just watched in the backlash isn't a recent invention. It has a track record going back generations, and understanding that track record makes the present moment a lot easier to read clearly, right? And I am trying to be objective and just give you guys the information and you guys can think for yourself, but I'm just showing you guys and breaking down the different perspectives when it comes to Ana Kasparian point and the backlash and what they're saying, and tying this all together to just inform you, right? So I want to get into the last clip, which is the backlash, another form of backlash against Ana Kasparian on what she said. And the gap that I mentioned, right? And the disconnect between this conversation and it being very touchy and intense as it is. So I want you guys to check it out.
Like it or not, black people care about the border. Man, shut the f up. Black people care about the border. I don't give a f what black people care about. Oh, black people care about this. Black people care about that. Like,
And that was the information I said earlier, quote unquote, when this is Hassan Piker. He's another political commentator who supports the Democrat Party. Very popular, very known for screaming. But this was the quote that I was saying when basically he said, I don't give a damn about, what, care about. So that's what I'm saying. This is the backlash, and these are individuals basically reacting to Ana Kasparian and Hassan Piker now that you guys see. Popular, very, very known, well-known political commentators that are Democratic Party supporters. So I'm tying it in of how the division keeps us stuck as a whole.
shut the f up. That's not how politics works. Clown take. Can you shut the fuck up when it comes to black folks? You really don't want to talk about us unless it comes from voting. When is the last time you spoke about Sudan? I'm gonna fucking ether you. Any other black folk want to engage in radical activist language in this fucking chat? Suck my fucking cock, okay?
And then most recently, we have Ana Kasparian. Ana Kasparian was very much hardcore lefty, hardcore liberal. And as time has gone on, she's, of course, flipped the switch. She seemed to be very hardcore right from the clips that I've seen. And there is this one clip that's going viral currently right now on the internet. And it's of a clip of her talking about the George Floyd death. And I'm like, okay, well, what she has to say about, George Floyd. And I'm listening to this. And I kid you not, she uses George Floyd's demise to stand on his death, to cry and be a victim. Now, where have we seen this before? I don't know what to tell you. It's like the lineage of evil. It's the same playbook, right? You have Kim Porter, Amber Geiger, the list goes on. They get on the stand and they cry, oh, I didn't know, oh, woe is me. And that's exactly what Ana Kasparian's doing. She tries to say that during, George Floyd and what happened there, and she's such a coward, right? That's what I really despise about these people, this lineage of evil, is that she's such a coward that she can't even come out and say white, right? She says that there was a lot of, racism against, light-skinned people.
So, for instance, after the George Floyd protests happened and everything, there was this culture of people openly saying some pretty horrific things about people with light skin.
Huh? What the hell is light-skinned people, bruh? There are black people who are light-skinned. What are you talking about, boo-boo? Huh? What do you mean? But we all know what she means. She means white people. Now, eventually, in the video, she comes out and says it, right? Because she had to muster up some courage to come out and say the W word. But she's like, there's a bunch of racism. And, people were saying mean things about, quite frankly, light-skinned people. And there was, racism against, white people that was going on.
Just open racism against white people.
What? And I find this interesting because it tailors, because I would have probably bet my life she probably voted for Trump, but it tailors what Trump was talking about during the last election, how he was coming in, on behalf of white people. He's like, hey, there's a lot of anti-white racism that we got to stop. And that's what his whole spiel, that's what his whole campaign, that's what his whole administration has been doing. As we see with the Voting Rights Act, as we see with him trying to target DEI, which has then led to the Tuskegee Airmen being taken out and then being put back in, in Philadelphia, removing slavery facts about the country. That's what his role in this country has been, is to cater to the white ignorance. But to be honest with you, I don't see this as a shock, because at the end of the day, one thing that binds these people together is their whiteness, all right? We see that even with Nick Fuentes, that he's willing to completely go into a Great Depression, he said, if it means we maintain a white majority country. So this is par for the course with these ignorants.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. Zooming out, How does division keep regular people stuck, or, all of us stuck? Regular people is what I mean, as in we all are just individuals trying to make it out, figure out life, take care of our families, love on who love on us, things like that. So we all regular, right? That's how I look at it. Even though we're uniquely special with our talents and gifts and things that we do, and supporting in unity of, being productive citizens of society and add value and things like that. But I basically want to say, now that we're zooming out, and let's look at the track record, going back generations, and understanding that track record makes the present moment a lot easier to read clearly. Like I said, after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, Black Americans made real and measurable gains. Black men held political office, Black families built property and wealth. In some parts of the South, Black and white sharecroppers who were dealing with the same landowners started recognizing their daily conditions were nearly identical, right? Recognizing their conditions were nearly identical and began moving toward each other. And in response from those at the top wasn't purely violent, though violence was absolutely part of it. The more effective tool was simpler and cheaper, right? Poor white Southerners were told their real problem wasn't the landlord taking the majority of what they grew. It was the Black family farming the land next door. The moment that message landed, the share focus dissolved. The landlords didn't have to fight anyone directly. The tenants did it for them, and everyone at the bottom lost ground while everyone at the top held theirs. Move forward to the 1920s and 1930s. The labor movement was building real momentum. Coal miners, garment workers, steel workers, people with nothing in common except identical daily conditions, were finding each other on picket lines. When they held together across their differences, they made real progress. When they fractured along identity lines, which employers deliberately encouraged by bringing in workers during this time from one group to undercut another, the strikes collapsed and everyone lost. Not some of them, all of them. The employer walked away untouched every single time the workers stopped looking in the same direction. Nobody needs to redesign this pattern from scratch each generation. It works, so it keeps getting used. And it doesn't require anyone sitting in a room plotting against regular people. It just requires understanding, even instinctively, that a divided group is easier to manage than a united one. The incentive to keep people divided never disappears because the math never changes. Pull that away to today. A working class family in rural Ohio, sorry, rural Ohio, and a working class family in Baltimore are not living in separate realities when it comes to daily pressure bearing down on them. Rent climbs faster than any raise either of them have seen in years. One expected medical bill puts both households in a hole that takes months to climb out of. And their Pacific histories are different. Their neighborhood experiences are different. And those differences are real and deserve honest acknowledgement. But the day-to-day grind, they're nearly identical. The anxiety on Sunday night before the work week starts, the same feeling, two completely different zip codes. When those two families are focused on fighting each other over identity, neither of them is asking the same questions about the same decisions, creating those shared pressures. That's the distraction. Not a secret conspiracy, just a pattern that repeats because the incentive to keep it going never disappears from the people it benefits most. Anna named this directly in the clip from the last section. Her words were that what pits people against each other most is concentrated power at the top, pulling from everyone's paycheck regardless of color. And what I think she's getting at is, political leaders, in regards of your local legislators and local legislations, right? So you have to understand that voting matters no matter what color you are. We are in this together and we're just trying to make the best of it, live and take care of our families. And at the end of the day, we are better together than apart. And she's describing this exact historical pattern that I mentioned, zooming out from an insider media operation that, whether intended to or not, spent years amplifying the very division they claim to be fighting against. That's uncomfortable to sit with, but it's worth sitting with honestly because it isn't a left or a right problem. It's a human problem. Every political movement across history has used the same tool at some point. The question is always whether the people being divided catch on fast enough to change the outcome. You can recognize real historical injustice, and a lot of that recognition is completely warranted, but still acts honestly. Rather, the way that recognition is being channeled is actually moving anything forward. Anger at a real problem is legitimate. Redirecting that anger toward the person standing next to you who is dealing with the same problem from a slightly different angle, that's where the damage happens. Every time the redirection works, the source of the problem stays untouched. That's why we're better together than apart. It doesn't matter the race. We're all going through the same problems. We are going through trial and tribulations that have nothing to do with race, have nothing to do with any of that. We're all voting, trying to pick the best political leader that takes public office to help generations and help the country keep moving forward while being productive citizens and just taking care of ourselves and those we love and pouring into each other. That's why I brought up the historical pattern, because I mentioned when those individuals were together and they were all, during the labor movement, just trying to get some work and trying to work and take care of those loved ones, it was going great. Until the divisiveness took place and it tore everybody, it hurt everybody. Nobody wanted, it benefited nobody. And when you look at it that way, and you wonder the redirection, how the redirection that works and the source of the problem stays untouched, everyone who got played goes home tired and further apart than before. And that's horrible. So if the identity narrative is losing its grip, what actually fills that space? And the answer isn't complicated, which is itself worth pausing on. Because whenever someone tries to make a straightforward answer feel impossible to reach, that complication is usually doing a job. Shared problems are stronger common ground than shared identity labels. That's not a political position. It's just how human beings actually function when the noise gets stripped away and the situation in front of them is concrete. Think about what happens when a neighbor's car breaks down at 6 a.m. on a cold day. Nobody runs a background check before offering a jump. The shared reality of the moment is obvious, so people will respond to what's directly in front of them instead of the story they've been carrying around. That clarity doesn't disappear in ordinary life. It just gets harder to access when someone keeps handing you a reason to distrust the person standing next to you. To be straight about it, the question here isn't whether discrimination and bias exist in America or have existed in America. They did. It was a horrific time in American history. No country is perfect. And, anyone who waves that off entirely is skipping over reality to protect a comfortable story. But the productive version of this conversation doesn't live at either extreme. It lives in the Pacific. What decisions, what systems, what policies are creating the most daily pressure on regular working people right now? Who is actually accountable for them? Those questions have real concrete answers, and those answers don't shift based on the background of the person asking. Anna landing where she landed doesn't make her right about everything, and her own track record inside the conversation is part of the story. Her own track record inside of this conversation is part of the story. But when someone who spent years inside of a framework decides publicly that the framework isn't producing the results for people it claims to serve, that's information worth taking seriously. Not because she's suddenly the authority on what comes next, but because it confirms something most regular people already felt in their gut long before anyone said it out loud from that position. The goal coming out of this isn't to pick a new team. It's to stop letting other people assign your team based on how you look or where you grew up. The moment you accept that your interests are automatically defined by your identity group, you hand it your voice over to who controls that group story. The more durable move is holding every figure and institution and every claim to that same standard. Right? And what I mean is to the accountables, as in the issues, not the divisive rhetoric. Take the divisive rhetoric away. Don't add fuel to it. Don't entertain it, because it basically adds more fuel to the fire and it actually spreads the fire than actually contain it to put it out. Right? So a consistent standard is honestly holding your local legislators and public officials accountable to what everyday regular working Americans deal with. So when you look at it like that, you have to understand that the labels are holding us back from being united to actually tackle everyday problems that we all deal with, no matter what race. Right? So that's where my take is on it. Any system built with different rules for different people based on identity alone is a system that can be turned against anyone once the circumstances shift. Most people already know this. They just haven't always had the language to say it plainly. But when people start demanding that framework being used actually match the reality they can see in front of them, the distraction loses its grip. And that's what this whole conversation is really about. Drop a comment and tell me honestly, is what we're watching with Ana Kasparian a real shift in how people think, or just the same game with different players? Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. And the best way to bring us back together is, I like this quote from Morgan Freeman. He said, if you want to kill racism, stop entertaining it. If anything, speak in a way to build up in unity, and we all will be stronger together as communities, in our neighborhoods, as a person, strengthen our relationships, and coming across other individuals, because we all go through similar things, trials and tribulations, just in different ways, uniquely tied to our purpose. But the beautiful part is we get different perspectives that we may have not seen, as we all go through somewhat similar situations like synonyms. So the beauty is, two minds are stronger than one, and in unity we can uplift each other instead of tear each other down, which then helps us all grow out of love. And that's the trueness of love, which is truth, while also understanding that division helps no one but destroys and hurts everyone. I'm gonna leave it there, family, but I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. It was a very touchy subject. I wanted to be objective as possible. The divisive rhetoric, it boils my blood, because I just want all of us to love, spread peace, no matter the race, no matter the background, and be colorblind, and continue to promote to next generations and generations that, as me being a person and us as humans, out of respect for humanity, as me being a parent, that we are amazing when we actually just look at the problems before us as in what we're all trying to do, which is love, take care of family, and do the best we can to live this life and figure this thing out. Right? So with that being said, I hope you guys understood where I'm coming from. At the end of the day, love you guys. Catch you in the next one. Peace.